organization is called the Worker Justice Center of New York, and we are a human rights organization that promotes the rights and well-being of low-wage immigrant workers throughout New York State, with a focus on farm workers and other immigrant workers. We work in three basic areas, which is legal services, advocacy work, and community education. So the local community is quite involved in many of our projects. The immigrant workers that we work with have come forward to speak with journalists, to give public presentations, and are involved in our programs. We run a language exchange 2 times a month, and we also have 2 groups for farm worker women that meet regularly. And so those are some of the ways that workers are involved directly in our project. We are in the process of forming an advisory board for the organization that will be made up of low-wage workers. That project is still not complete, but we're in the process. I would say because we have many programs in human trafficking and workplace justice and domestic violence, the methods change depending on the situation, but all of our programs are based on an extensive outreach strategy. So we visit people in their homes. So I, for example, coordinate our agricultural outreach program in the Hudson Valley region. And we are out visiting people in their homes on the farms 1 or 2 nights per week, and making sure that we are sustaining contact with the community. So I would say that's one of our primary methods of making ourselves very available to the workers that we're trying to reach. And aside from the point of contact when we first meet someone, from there we take a kind of leadership development approach. If someone is very interested in our work or has natural leadership capabilities or is upset because there's injustices happening in their life or in their workplace, we work with them to try to help them advocate for themselves on the job, try to get them the resources that they need to make their situation better, and bring them deeper into our work by giving them opportunities to talk about their experience with journalists and others who may be interested in learning about their lives. I think we promote that empowerment process by kind of forming like a respectful relationship based on, equality. Although there may be many differences between my experience and the experience of an immigrant that comes to this country to work on a farm, I think we try to create a feeling of respect, mutual respect, that can hopefully help provide like a supportive environment for that person to then be able to take steps to become more of a leader or more empowered in their lives. So, depending on the program area, we have a number of projects. I particularly work within our workplace justice program, and the projects that we've taken on have been really aimed towards community integration, so really bringing people who may come from many different countries together with the local community, either to celebrate. We sometimes have parties where we bring people together just to share food and music or play soccer. We also do these language exchange nights, so that takes place 2 times a month, and we have people that speak Spanish as their first language come, and people that speak English as their first language come, and then they try to learn, and practice the other language together. We have women's groups where they get together as a group of women and decide what kinds of things they would like to learn, if they would like to start a business. All these different types of projects that they might imagine, we try to provide the resources and support for them to do that. Aside from that kind of community work, we also have been working on a documentation project on the Border Patrol in New York State, because New York is on the border with Canada. So we have active Border Patrol in New York that will often target undocumented immigrants that live in that area. And so for the past year, we've been collecting interviews with people who live in that area, have experienced some kind of discrimination or just fear of leaving their home due to the Border Patrol. So people are coming into our work with different abilities to engage and different abilities to be very public. But I think we're able to find very amazing people that want to contribute in the ways that they can. So for example, if someone is living near the Canadian border and has not left their farm in 4 years because they're afraid to be deported, even though they still may not leave their farm, they will share their story with us, which we can then share with others. So there's different ways for people to be involved. I think external communication is very important for nonprofit organizations because we need to look outside of ourselves for funding. So we have to kind of package and produce the work that we're doing for an external audience. So to that end, we work extensively with journalists to bring them to the farms so that they can see for themselves what is happening there. We've had farm workers do interviews on the radio. Whatever we can do to make those stories more available to others, we try to. And then for ourselves, we also produce a newsletter every month, which we send out to all of our supporters so that they can see pictures and hear about all of the different work that's going on. So just speaking about kind of the integration of immigrant communities with the local American communities, I think that in some ways it can be very challenging because there are language differences, and so the communication, just basic communication, is not always possible. But once we try to get into those spaces where people are becoming vulnerable by trying to speak a new language from both sides, I think that really does open up a different space for people to connect and to form friendships, and I think those connections are really what can help move our work forward. Because we work mostly in very rural areas in New York State, these areas, for them, immigration from Latin America is very new. It's only been taking place for the past 20 years or so, and so these communities are still just very small towns and very rural and farming communities. I think the sense of integration there is much more difficult in some ways, and in other ways it's easier because many of the immigrants are also from very rural farming communities, and I think in some ways there's a greater sense of solidarity because people actually understand each other's lifestyles more than maybe in a big city like New York. So it really depends on the situation and the circumstance, but I think overall there's a huge power differential between long-standing American farming families and recently arrived immigrants, and that can be very difficult to overcome. And I think when we see workers in bad working conditions, working in very unsafe environments, and their boss or their employer is just not really paying attention to that or really helping the situation or bettering the conditions, then we just know we have a lot more work to do to make them understand that the people that they're employing are human beings that deserve the same benefits and rights as anyone else. Sometimes that can be a struggle, but I've talked with many workers who unfortunately have had to demonstrate their own humanity for many years until their boss can understand that they do deserve those things too. And in some cases they're successful at that, and in some cases they're not, and it really just depends on the situation. But I would say in terms of integration, the language aspect is very big, and I think we have, a network of English tutors throughout New York that tries to go and help and do classes and things like that. with different degrees of success as far as whether people are actually becoming fluent in English or not. But even that point of contact of having the class with teachers that are coming to help, I think that can be an important connection for people, and I think, you know, it can be seen as a resource in other ways. That the border documentation work is ongoing. I just did an interview 6 days ago. So we'll be closing soon, but it's still happening, and we're going to be trying to produce an archive of all of the interviews with transcriptions and translations of all of those interviews so that they're publicly available for researchers, journalists, the public, etc.
Thank you.
You're welcome.